Thank you. And do we have Ms. Watkins, our residential reviewer?
Aye.
Excellent, thank you. And thanks for joining the meeting. Did I miss anyone on the roll call?
Joe,
Okay,
I just joined.
Mr. Sala is here. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, so I'd like to do a preliminary review of the agenda. Marta, have there been any changes to the tentative agenda as published?
No, there are no changes, Joe. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So there will be 2 items on the agenda. I'll get to the specifics in 1 second. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and review the minutes of the November 13th, 2024 meeting. So my fellow panel members, on November 22nd, 2024, you received an email which had the draft minutes of the November 13th, 2024 meeting. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the draft minutes?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes from the November 13th, 2024 DRP meeting? I'm hearing none. So who would like to make a motion to accept the minutes as circulated?
So moved. This is Donald.
Thank you, Mr. Can. There's a motion to approve the minutes as circulated by Mr. Can. Do we have a second?
Second, Kurjakar.
Mr. Kurjakar, thank you. There's a second. All in favor, if you could come off of mute and say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and read the design review panel opening statement. I'd ask everybody to go ahead and mute your microphones for a few minutes and bear with me while I read this statement. So Title 4, Subtitle 2, Part 1, Sections 32.4.203 and 204 establish the design review panel. We use the acronym DRP. The DRP was established to encourage design excellence and shall act in a consulting and advisory capacity to the agencies involved in the process for reviewing development plans. The objectives for the DRP's assessment include spatial, visual, and functional relationship to the topographical characteristics, the natural and built features of the site, as well as the surrounding features of the site, visual and functional integration of streetscapes, pedestrian pathways, playgrounds, recreational amenities, and parks. Streets and sidewalks are laid out in a safe and convenient manner, and parking is a positive design element. Building, parking garages, and other structures are spatially and visually integrated and suitable to their surroundings in proportion, massing, and type of materials and colors, signage and other elements of urban design. And plant materials are selected and cited to define the site, provide a theme, frame of view, enhance architecture and street character, improve microclimate, provide transition between dissimilar uses, screen objectionable views and uses, and reduce noise levels and glare. In carrying out its duties, the DRP utilizes the guidelines, plans, and architectural principles in the Comprehensive Manual of Development Policies and/or Master Plan, as well as other guidelines and regulations adopted into law. Certain areas of the county were designated by the County Council to require review by the DRP. The panel will provide a technical review of the proposed project. Issues relative to zoning, setback relief, environmental and stormwater management, and traffic regulations do not fall under the purview of the DRP and are regulated through the appropriate agencies responsible for those aspects of the development plan review process. The panel consists of 9 members. All are professionals with practical knowledge in the matters of design. For purposes of making recommendations on a particular project, 3 members shall constitute a quorum. The attendance and comments of each member shall be recorded in the minutes, which shall be an open record and available, along with all documents submitted to the panel for inspection and copying by the public. There will be an opportunity for the community to offer comments and suggestions at the conclusion of the applicant's presentation. These comments will be included in the written record of the meeting. When a speaker is called up to speak, please keep your comments focused on design perspectives within your allotted 2 minutes of time. If you're speaking on behalf of a community group, you will be allowed 5 minutes. At the conclusion of the meeting, the Department of Planning will sum up the recommendations of the panel before a motion for a vote is suggested. Recent legislation has changed the panel's recommendations to be advisory on the hearing officer and the various county agencies, unless the hearing officer or agencies find the panel's actions constitute an abuse of its discretion or are unsupported by the documentation and evidence presented. Disposition of the plan will be determined as either approved with conditions, or additional review with a second meeting being required. All right, so thank you very much for hearing my opening statement. We'll go ahead and proceed to the 2 items that are on the agenda. The first item is 311 Silburn Road in the Sudbrook Park residential review area. And the second item is 112 to 116 Slade Avenue, the Pikesville Armory in the Pikesville commercial review area. So we will proceed to item number 1, again, 311 Silburn Road in the Sudbrook Park residential review area. If the presenter would please introduce yourself, you will have the floor, and try to keep your presentation to within 15 minutes. The floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Greg Rice. I'm Vice President of Ameristar Homes. I thank you for taking your time this evening to meet me and review the proposed home that we are looking to put in Silburn over in Pikesville and Sudbrook area here. The package that I have prepared on this narrow lot is a farmhouse style 4-bedroom unit with 2.5 baths. It's a 2-story home. The first and second floor offers 1,915 square foot finished, and the basement level also offers an additional 752 foot finished in the product we're offering for the sale. This basement also has room for an additional bedroom, which a family could then get up to 5 bedrooms in a home if so wanted, as well as an additional bathroom in the basement area. The home, as in all homes with Ameristars, include a front porch, so we have a covered entrance going into the house, just under 400 square foot. This particular home style, which we call a Coolidge, also has a 2-car garage that helps with the off-street parking and as well as in the garage. And we also supply in front of that 2-car garage a 20 by 20 2-car pad. And leading to that 2-car pad is a 12 by 57 foot long driveway back to that area. So providing adequate parking is important for us. It keeps the cars off the road. And I think that's important because a number of the roads I see in Sudbrook right now seem to be using on-street parking, and this should help this situation. All homes that Ameristar built, when we are completed, the lots are completely sodded. And also I've included in this package a very detailed landscape plan in which helps shield the homes from the neighboring homes. And I do this by using as much as native species plants as possible. Currently, the lot has a number of dead trees on it, and trees are not that are not in good health. I think there's a picture in the package that shows the front view of the lot. Ivy seems to have taken over these large trees over the years and has hurt and damaged the trees significantly. On the rear of the property, there's currently sheds that have fallen down, partial fencing that has fallen down, and areas that need to be cleaned up. And although outside my limits of disturbance that the county likes to hold tight, I also go outside of that without equipment and hand do and take out any of the objects that the sheds that are falling out. We do all those items by hand so we don't disturb the ground around them. This particular home and elevation we have matched with the color scheme that we call number 3 here, which is different than the home adjacent or next to it at 613, which has more of a green and an ivy tone to it. So this home, you'll see, unfortunately, my scheme shows a shutter, but my experience from the past DRP meetings, shutters were not preferred on the front windows, which is comments I've gotten on 2 other neighboring homes. So I used a different window style, a 4/1 type of a farmhouse pattern with a wide white trim going completely around the windows, and then blended that in with a mixture of vinyl siding, a certain key manufacturer, which allowed me to use some vertical siding on a gable and a bump out, and then vertical siding around the front door, which is recessed under the porch, the face of the garage, and then the second floor area, which the upper bedrooms are in. The materials on the sides and the rear are like materials that are on the front of the product, and which you can see when we get to the architectural plans that I've attached. The house is approximately 33 foot tall, 26 foot wide. It will have a basement areaway, and a garage door which has elongated panels, and a front door which has a 2/3 light type of a farmhouse appearance. And with that, I think that's about as much as introduction. I think I have followed the guidelines as far as the mailings and notified everyone as much as possible. Mr. Rundle, by the way, is no longer president of the Sudbrook HOA and has passed his responsibility on to the new president, Mr. Barnfield. He copied him the DRP package as lately as Monday when Mr. Rundle contacted me and told me he would be no longer involved. So the community may be part of this meeting today, but they have received the whole package. So thank you much for your time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Rice, for the presentation. So at this time, the floor will be open for any public input or feedback from the community. And again, as a reminder, if you're speaking on behalf of an individual, you're allowed 2 minutes. On behalf of a community group, you're allowed 5 minutes. So Marta, Brett, has anybody signed up to speak?
I don't have anyone on my end, Brett.
No, nobody signed up to speak.
Excuse me. No, I don't have one signed up.
Okay. Thank you. So at this time, since there's no one signed up to speak, we'll go ahead and officially close the public comment period. And we'll go ahead and move to the panel for any comments that the panel may have. So because this is a residential project, there will not be a staff report. So we'll go ahead and jump right into the comments, and we'll start with the residential reviewer, Ms. Watkins. Ms. Watkins, if you're out there, unmute, and it's your turn.
All right. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Hear you fine.
Ken?
Good, thanks. And thanks, Greg, for the presentation. I know Greg's been in front of the panel before, and as I think there's one other house that's come in front of the committee that's in this series of 3. So thank you, Greg, for the presentation. I will confirm that Dean Rendell did receive the package, and it was passed along to the board of directors and any neighbors or anybody who was interested in looking at the plan. So Greg, know that that was distributed by Dean Rendell, who is not the president, but is still a member of the board. So I'll just start my comments. Thank you for staying on this particular slide, which is kind of the site plan of the building. This is really a series of 3 houses that are being built by Ameristar. I think this is the second one that's being constructed in this series that we're seeing in this site plan, which is the property to the left. The property that we see to the right of this is the house that sits a little further back. And then I think there is another one either to the left or the right. I always get confused, that sits further back as well. So one of my first comments will be that since this is kind of I'm not going to say a panhandle, but it is sort of a panhandle lot in which these houses are pushed back from the road. It would be great to see kind of how all 3 of these lots are being developed with associated landscaping and streetscaping along the edge of the road. I realize we're just reviewing this one particular property this evening, but since all 3 of these are being developed in these subdivided lots, it would be great for the community to see kind of how they are coordinating with each other. That's my first comment. The second comment goes to, it might be good to go to the landscape plan for this comment. One of the board members, as well as I will make this comment to be entered into the meeting minutes. The driveway does seem to be quite wide on this lot. It's a very narrow lot, and it seems to be a lot of pavement taking up, I would say, almost 50% of the front yard is driveway, which is not really indicative of what we see in Sudbrook Park. We prefer to see narrower driveways with more landscaping. I understand that this driveway is trying to respond to a 2-car garage. So it needs to widen out for 2 cars to get into and out of the garage. But this is being a lot of pavement in front of the home. And so we'd like to see if that could be narrowed down some. That goes to also, if we look at the elevation of the house, which is done in the farmhouse style, which we appreciate. I think it has a lot of aesthetic proportions and looks good. I appreciate the detailing around the windows, the wider frame. But it is dominated by that garage door, since this is a 2-car garage on again, a pretty narrow lot. You know, almost 30% of the elevation of the house is garage door, which is a little less proportional than we would like to see. I know that 2-car garages are very popular. I understand that this is something that I guess the folks who are building this house may prefer. We would prefer to see a 1-car garage so that garage door was a little less imposing, maybe a wider front porch. That's more indicative of this style of house. With a 1-car garage where the garage door is not quite so prominent on the exterior. That would also allow maybe the driveway to become a little less um, uh, kind of prominent in the landscaped front yard. Um, the materials are okay. I think on the former project, we made as a collective committee a comment on vinyl siding versus maybe fiber cement siding that's a little more indicative of a wood siding, which is prevalent in the Sudbrook Park neighborhood, either masonry or wood siding. We find that fiber cement siding adds for a little more typical and quality kind of, it mimics the detailing of wood siding a little more accurately than does vinyl siding, and tends to be a little more of a indigenous material, if you will. I do agree. I know in the past that this committee, as well as I, have made comments on if shutters are going to be put on the house, they should be of appropriate size. And typically, sometimes these are smaller. Obviously, with the 2 windows in front, that might be a challenge. So I am in support of this house not having shutters on it, because I'm not sure that they could fully be sized and detailed in the way working wood shutters would be detailed. I think that the overall house has an aesthetic appeal. I think the fact that it does kind of sit a little back from the road is a little challenging, but and it doesn't align with the 2 houses on either side of it is challenging. You know, there's very broad on the side elevations, have windows, which I appreciate. It's kind of a big broad side of a house. But I do see that the landscape plan tries to mitigate some of that, which is helpful. That, I think, are really our comments, and I have passed along this information. There was an additional comment that the neighborhood does appreciate that a lot of the plantings here, if not all of them, are native plants, and we do appreciate that. It's very important to us as Sudbrook Park, even though this property and this house is not in the historic district. It is an Olmsted neighborhood and sits adjacent. So we do appreciate the effort to use native planting materials in the planting plans, as is what we encourage all of the homeowners to do. So I'll pass that along. I think those are all of our comments for now. I may come back at the end and other comments.
Great. Thanks, Ms. Watkins.
Thank you.
I'd like to give Mr. Rice an opportunity to respond to one, the driveway comment in terms of excessive paving, and then 2, the 2-car garage comment. Mr. Rice, could you respond to those?
I believe the code for this county driveway minimally is 12 foot, which is the entrance I'm using off of Shelburne. This particular style house, a Coolidge model that we call it, has been designed around a 2-car garage preferred to by our home buyers nowadays. It is also very price sensitive. The siding that was mentioned is extremely expensive. And for a house that is in a price-sensitive market in Sudbrook right now, these things may make it difficult to sell. This house is not sold, so I am open to being able to work with whatever I need to do in order to bring the house up to approval status. But I must also say, although the front yard seems to have 2-car parking in front of a 2-car garage, it also has a huge backyard. And most of the families that I deal with in the homes that we build are using their backyards more than the aesthetic of just a front yard. So although the driveway does support a two-car garage, the use of this property really is giving the customer the value of a large backyard, which is why I pulled the house forward in front of the other home. I wanted to get some bit of a street profile between the three, and because of the narrow house design, if I push this looking more one car, it's going to be very similar to the home in the center. So we chose, in order to blend in something a little different, to give the three homes all different types of personalities and appearance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. I've also noticed on the plan that we're looking at that the driveway does not continue at the width where the two-car garage is. It kind of necks down to the single drive. So I did want to comment on that. All right, so let's go to Mr. Can. Mr. Can, do you have any review comments?
Yes. Can we go back to the first slide of the front elevation, the rendered elevation? Okay, I think the only comment I have, because I think the comments that Ms. Watkins provided are on target. I would agree with virtually everything she said. I would look very carefully at the proportion of the entrance porch, which really seems sort of very secondary, and sort of whether that can be visually enhanced at all, I think is important. I would look at the design of the garage door to see whether something can be done to improve that in character with this building. And then the only other comment I had was that the roof that extends over the porch, the proportions of that on the architectural drawings and on the rendering do not appear to be exactly the same. And I think that's, one feature that should be looked at pretty carefully. I think it's much more successful in the rendered drawing than it is in this drawing rather than in the rendered drawing. But otherwise, I think the rest of the building seems appropriate, and I don't have any other comments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. I'm sorry, was there a comment? Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Can. Let's go to Mr. Sala.
I agree with some of the comments from my fellow panelists. I would add a couple more. I think the siding in the rendering, in the area where you have two windows next to each other on the second floor, in the rendering they're horizontal. I think that's a little bit more successful versus the vertical in the drawing. I think the rendering looks better, definitely. Kind of the play with the vertical and horizontal there between those two masses looks really good in the rendering. I agree about the garage door. I think if it was maybe a carriage style or a craftsman style garage door, since there's big emphasis on that on the facade, that definitely will enhance the facade a bit more. I did have concerns about the different setbacks between the adjacent houses, and I looking at the area, there wasn't a lot of variation in that neighborhood there, but I don't understand the rationale behind it. If there's an opportunity to create an alignment there, I think that would be great for this neighborhood. Those are my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sala. Let's go to Mr. Sharma.
Good evening, everyone. I don't have any additional comment at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Let's go to Ms. Sauce next.
Yes, good evening. My fellow panelists have covered a lot of good comments and suggestions. my question or comments, I guess, would be: is it possible to upsize the evergreen plant material? You know, a lot of it could be upsized by about 2 feet. Some of the shrubs could be upgraded from 3 to 5 gallon. I think with the alignment of the houses, giving privacy to that backyard is paramount. So if there could be more plant material provided back there, or just upsize plant material, I think that would help with the alignment and provide a better backyard experience for all. And aside from what my fellow panelists have said, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Sauce. Let's go to Mr. Kirchikar.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. I do agree with most of the comments made by my fellow panelists. I think, Ms. Watkins, you hit it on the head with the driveway comment. I do have concerns with the width. I do understand the need for a wider driveway to accommodate the 2 cars. However, I think I agree you should look at, maybe reducing the width and keeping it optimal so that the cars can be accommodated, but not having such a wide driveway. I also see the opportunity to add more trees or plant material to help sort of screen the vast paving in the front, and probably define the front yard in a better way. You are removing a lot of trees, which I understand some of them might are noted here as dead, and not sure of the condition of others. But if that can be done, I think it will help the project a lot. And then my just last comment is that Japanese holly and Gold Mound spirea are really not native. I think I would look at a different species of those evergreens, especially the Japanese holly, the steds. It's more of a pyramidal thing, and this is a homesteadian, style neighborhood. I would look at something else that might be a little more natural form. It's just a suggestion, not a requirement. That is all I have.
Great, thank you, Mr. Kirchikar. Let's go to Mr. Walters as our last panelist before myself.
Thanks, Joseph. One comment and a question. The question, the plans and the elevations have a majority of the windows on the long sides of the house is optional. Are those planned to be built or not? Do you know at this time?
At this point, we tend to put additional windows that are needed besides the mandatory egress windows up to a customer to choose. With furniture settings and beds in bedrooms, loading the house with windows may restrict them from where they can set up furniture and have their bedroom. So what we do is we have to put egress windows in all the bedrooms per code, and then we offer the customer additional windows in those bedrooms should they want to have more light and can arrange their furniture and their settings around additional windows.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if the plan was if you were building this or waiting for a homeowner to purchase and customize.
Yeah, so we offer the options that you see on the plan. I have no issue at all with adding the windows, but sometimes the marketabilities and the way customers want to set up their rooms, the windows may interfere with that. Plus, with all the proximity, they are narrow lots, and with the proximity of those windows looking directly at the neighbor's house, that may not be as of a great benefit, because even without the optional windows, the houses have adequate light and things coming in.
Yeah, and I guess that goes to the second comment is the placement on the lot. I think with my fellow panelists here or members, I'm questioning the need to pull it forward and not align with the remaining houses that are on along the street. There seems to be a pretty consistent edge of where the houses line the street, and this one is pulled forward 20 some feet more than the rest of the houses on that side of the road.
I believe the existing homes that start from, I guess, the main road that comes in to Sudbrook, those homes I think are sited further up even than what I'm proposing here. The center home at 613 that you see dotted in on the plan, that was pushed backwards in order to be able to use the wider width of that lot. So this home here, I could even pull forward more to match the existing community homes, and that would even help reduce some of the driveway area we're concerned with. But I think there may be an aerial in here someplace of one of the attachments to show how the existing homes on the block line up in relationship. May be difficult to see off of this. But as you come up from Milford Mill, the homes coming beginning on Silburn, they're set up considerably closer to the road than what I'm doing now. So maybe the compromise could be bringing this up even further. That would reduce the driveway as well as increase a nicer backyard. But I'm more than open to suggestions.
Yeah, I can chime in, and I'm looking at the chat from Ms. Nugent in the Department of Planning. That there is a zoning provision that you're required to look at the front averaging when you look at the couple structures on each side. So really the zoning office would have some input on that. Perhaps you have not gone that far yet, Mr. Rice, but again, I think that like from where it's cited, that will get worked out from the front averaging.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Walters?
That's it.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. And I don't have any further comments from my side. So what
Joseph, I'm sorry, this is Denise again, just rounding back on a few things, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Because I appreciate Greg's response to some of these comments. I do want to just reiterate per Mr. Walters' comments, those windows on the side. If those optional windows aren't put in, it becomes a really, really broad building. This is a narrow, long house. And if that fenestration is not added in on the side, it becomes a lot of siding and not a lot of openings. So just putting it in the record that we would really, as a community, the sides of these houses are just as important at the front and the back. And so we'd like to see them treated with the same level of aesthetic and consideration on all sides. So our preference would be to add the windows in. And if those windows aren't added, perhaps the side of the house has a little more demarcation similar to the front with different types of siding. I don't know what that would be, but it does lead to a pretty large blank wall if those optional windows aren't added. So that would be a preference from the community to do that. Just going back to the garage, because it is a wide garage door, I guess, Greg, you said this building is being built on spec. It's not sold yet. So I just want to register into the meeting notes that the neighborhood would prefer if this could be a one-car garage so that it allows for that front porch to be wider and a little more in keeping with the nature of the architecture in the community and is not quite as prevalent on the front. I understand the need to market that. People love two-car garages, obviously. but in a lot in a house that's this narrow, it's ambitious to put that amount of garage door on the front of a house, and it helps if that can be reduced. So we just register that to help kind of the aesthetics of the house, the proportion of the house, and to reduce some of that paving in the front, that perhaps this become a one-car garage as opposed to a two-car. I think the other house on the other side of this is a one-car garage, and I think that was one of the aesthetics that we appreciated about the house. So I would just reiterate that. I do want to emphasize that I agree with the comment about the garage door maybe having some more carriage house type of hardware on it. We understand that this is not a carriage house door, that it's an overhead rolling door, but to aesthetic kind of things that help make this blend in with some of the more traditional architecture in the neighborhood, that would be a helpful addition. So I just wanted to add those comments to the notes so that Fred can respond to that, or we can, at least it's registered as our community concerns. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Watkins. So we are now at the time for a motion. And again, as a reminder, we can approve the project as it's shown. We can approve the project with conditions, and or we can, if the comments are so significant, that we can request a second review meeting. What I'd like to do is summarize the comments that I heard. I heard a lot of feedback on the driveway width and impervious area. I heard comments as it relates to the size of the two-car garage, as well as the materials. I heard a comment about the main entrance door, which was an afterthought. And then I heard several comments as it relates to landscaping, larger landscaping, as well as more landscaping. And then finally, there was a comment or two about the windows on this, specifically on the sides as it relates to the other homes. So if I could just put a thought out there that because Mr. Rice is making this submittal as a spec submittal, if I had to guess, the homeowner would make some modifications to the elevations, perhaps the materials, and perhaps the layout. Mr. Rice would have to come back anyhow, right, with any kind of modifications to the elevations and the architecture. Perhaps this panel could say we approve the project with conditions of, A through as many as we want. And when the conditions are met, then the project would come back for an administrative review by myself. So that's just a suggestion. But I'm certainly open to anything. So who would like to summarize the comments into a motion?
Joe, I'm struggling around the comment with the garage because that is a big design change. Otherwise, I think your suggestion would be perfectly acceptable. I am not sure about that one, personally. Can I suggest maybe something, Joe, maybe since to keep us moving?
Please, sure.
Could you go to the site plan for a minute? And I was looking at the site plan earlier today. I noticed earlier in this call, but maybe a shift in the driveway. Maybe if you could go to the landscape plan, it's a little bit more clear on that plan. See the approach. Maybe if we just mirror the driveway relative to the center line of the garage, then you're sort of exposing less of the garage door allowing us to move some of the trees and landscape that's on the right-hand side of the driveway to the left-hand side of the driveway, that could start to help conceal some of the garage door, giving more visibility to the entry to the house. I think maybe that's a subtle change that would allow us to, and maybe with enhancements to the garage door, allow us to keep the current design. Because I can see how a 2-car garage scenario would be desirable to a client. But then if that is an acceptable sort of solution, maybe we could do that as a subtle change. Thoughts from the panel on that? Ms. Watkins, do you have any?
I'll weigh
Can-
in because obviously I'm the one that has that a little bit of heartburn, and the community has a little bit of heartburn about that. I think that can help. I like that suggestion, and I do. Mr. Rice had said that he could consider changing the garage, so maybe he may want to weigh in on if that is an option for this. The thing that I think we find a little just difficult is that this is an even narrower house than the one next door, but the garage is that much bigger. You know, just the proportion of what's happening with the garage door, and not just the garage door, but even in this plan, you see that the front porch is really almost just the width of the door. That's very minuscule, and that's really. I personally, if I were buying the house, I wouldn't want that, but I understand why people would want a larger garage. I think that is something that people like and buy. But in this narrow of a house, on this narrow of a lot, I'm not sure that the 2-car garage option is really appropriate. That would be that's basically our concern. Maybe there's an opportunity to do it on the other lot, but it just feels like it's trying to squeeze too much into too little. That's kind of the concern.
All right, so we still need a motion, and if Ms. Watkins or Mr. Sala, if you know we want to put in the motion that it's a 1-car garage, then that's the motion.
Okay.
Joseph, do you want me to make the motion? I'm not sure I can list all of those things, but I'll try. We'll see.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll make a motion that we, have reviewed this particular submittal, and our comments are that we would like to see if the driveway, the amount of impervious surface can be reduced. We would like to see there be a 1-car garage as opposed to a 2-car garage. There was concern about the proportion of the front porch roof. That's what I heard Mr. Khan say, that we'd like to see that be more like the illustrative, not the illustrative rendering, but the actual architectural drawings. There was a motion to have the plantings be larger and perhaps more plentiful than what is shown here. A few more of them that would make the more trees and more bushes, and also that the 2 types of plantings, I forget which ones they were not necessarily native, and that perhaps they be the American holly, and the other one, I'm not sure, someone else can modify that, be native plants in lieu of the ones that are listed. The side windows, we prefer to see the optional windows added due to the fact that the house is long and has a broad side, and having that fenestration there is helpful, especially due to the fact that the house is pulled forward from the other house. And there was some comments about aligning the houses, but that's optional. I realize that's long, sorry. If you want to modify, that's fine.
So thank you, Ms. Watkins. So I think all the comments and conditions are appropriate. What I did not hear is the action that you are proposing. So I believe, if I had to assume, you're saying you'd like to approve the project with the following conditions, and the conditions are what you listed.
Yes, correct. Just for point of clarification, is this building, and Mr. Riskin, is this building going to be built on spec? You're going to go ahead and build it and then put it on for sale? Are you waiting for a buyer to buy it and then build it, Mr. Rice? Because we had talked about that being a qualification of resubmittal.
It will be built as spec based on your approval. Color schemes, design, based on what the board approves, is what will be spec and sold in that manner. What I would also ask for you to do is seriously take a look at the interior design so you can see how the square footage of the house is affected differently by eliminating that garage. If you would just please also keep that in consideration, I would appreciate it.
So Joseph, I'm not sure what that necessarily means through our review. If we just categorically approve it with those comments, then it means that.
Well, what I would suggest is the motion would be, you propose to approve the project with the following conditions and list the 4 or 5 conditions that you listed. The revised plans and specifications would be required to be resubmitted to the Department of Planning, addressing the comments, and it would not have to come back before a public meeting, but it would get reviewed administratively by the panel. So I'd ask Ms. Watkins to try the motion one more time with those words, and I think that'll get us to where we need to be.
Okay. I make a motion that the project be amended with the comments that were made. And do you want me to repeat those items, or do we have those clearly stated?
I'd ask you to try to succinctly and efficiently restate the conditions.
Right. Okay.
And just make sure that you say at the beginning what you were planning to do, whether it's approved or,
Okay. That we approve the plans with the following amendments. To provide a 1-car garage with a narrower driveway, a larger front porch, with the proportions of the front porch roof as illustrated in the construction documents, to provide the optional windows on the side of the project, to provide additional and larger plantings, trees and shrubs that are all native, I think those were the major ones, right?
Okay.
Okay. And that it be able to be approved through administrative review, come back and be approved through administrative review.
Great. Thank you very much. Department of Planning, there's a motion on the table with several conditions. Are those conditions clear for a motion?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, there's a motion on the floor to approve it with several conditions, without having a public meeting required again, and having the plans reviewed administratively. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Sala, thank you very much. All in favor, if you could come off of mute and say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Rice.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are through item number 1. We're going to immediately proceed to item number 2. And again, it is 112 to 116 Slade Avenue, the Pikesville Armory in the Pikesville Commercial Review Area. If the presenter would please introduce yourself. I think there's going to be a series of presenters. Go ahead and introduce yourself. The floor will be yours. And reminder to direct Marta to advance the slides if you need those advanced.
Absolutely. And I will kick off on behalf of the team. Because there will be multiple presenters and there's a number of folks here, I'll do a quick round of introductions of everyone you'll see tonight, and then we'll go right into the presentation. So I'm Peter DiPrinzio. I'm with Seawall. We are the development partner of the Pikesville Armory Foundation, who is, together we're leading the transformation of the Pikesville Armory site, which is what we'll talk about tonight, or in other words, we'll actually talk about a portion of this larger development. Also on the call today is not mentioned here, but the director of the Pikesville Armory Foundation, David Ginsburg, is here. And then on the slide that you see here, Chris Mudd with Venable, legal partner, with Ziegler Sneed, Doug Bother, Chris Brown, and Dustin Page. Architecture and landscape architecture, Unknown Studio, Nick Glaze and Saeed. MK Engineering, Tony Cortiel and Christian Gideon. So we can go to the first slide and the introduction of this project. There's a ton of excitement around this project. It's a project that's been, we can actually go ahead, skip a couple slides. These are just of the project experience for the architecture and landscape architecture teams. This is great. There's a ton of excitement for this project. It's been a project that's been in the works for a number of years, and we're really excited to present tonight. I'm really excited to show some of the progress, in particular focused on the part of the site that you see highlighted here for the panel's review. The whole idea for this project came out of actually a public input session. It was the Governor's Commission back in 2016 that started the process of over 1,500 people, community stakeholders and organizations and private individuals contributing their thoughts to what should happen with this decommissioned military site. And out of all that input has come this project. On it, there's a lot of planning that's happened. As you can see in some of the shaded parts, I'm just going to describe them because I think the larger, although we're not discussing the entire project tonight, I think having an understanding of the entire project is important for its understanding. There will be a large amount of, the goal of the project overall has been to create an intergenerational destination for recreation, for art, and for culture. And so we have an agreement, a memorandum of understanding in place with the Baltimore County, with their Department of Recreation Parks to do outdoor recreation, fields and walking paths and destination playground and indoor basketball courts, and with the Department of Aging to do a senior center. There's conversations with a number of other tenants to do culinary education, to do art studios, to do maker space, to do more activations for kids, to do events, lawn and space. There's the NCO club that's been active on this site for many, many years, and the veterans will continue to meet there, and as well as lots of other ideas and things to come. But tonight we're talking about the access to the site, the parking garage, and some of the more logistical pieces of it. So with that, I should also mention restaurants, cafes, and some retail activations planned as well. So there's a lot going into it. With this, I will pass it. We can actually go to the next slide real quick. I'm going to pass it to Chris Mudd, and actually the following slide, where he will just start to focus a little bit on the parcel and the east of the project that we're going to talk about this evening.
Thanks, Peter. Good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Mudd. I'm an attorney at Venable. I know a number of the folks on the call, but not everyone might not know me. But I'm a land use attorney. I help clients with land entitlements and all throughout Baltimore County and some of the surrounding jurisdictions as well. And I've been involved with this project for really for quite some time now. We worked on legislation that facilitated the use in this kind of the heart of this residential community. And interestingly, that legislation actually requires the placement of structured parking here to accommodate the use. I wanted to just briefly talk about a couple things sort of legally and logistically to set the framework for you as you make your way through the design analysis or evaluation of the design with the architects and landscape architects. First and foremost is it's a little unusual for me. I've been before the DRP many times, and this is the first time I've been where only a portion of a site is subject to DRP review. And I think it's important for the DRP to understand the limits of your comments and evaluation are really to what you see in red on this screen. The site's much bigger, of course, and Peter talked a lot about the site. And it's sort of doubly unique in that the Pikesville design review area largely focuses on the Reisterstown Road corridor, which is really north of, or at least plan view north anyway, of where we're looking at now. And it hugs the Reisterstown Road corridor on either side of it, particularly as you get into the more business-oriented side, up past Suburban Club over there. And then it rounds the corner a little bit at Slade, and it picks up this frontage here. And the DRP's, I think, role here is to evaluate the design of this when looking from Slade Avenue, and that's really what we're focused on. And we think, as you make your way through to this design, you're gonna, or this evening, really, the presentation this evening, you're going to see, two uninspired buildings in this location, and we hope that you're going to agree that we're providing a much more inspired design from this location. And before I turn it over, like two other things to mention, just sort of, again, piggybacking on the comments I've just made. The design review, the blue line on this exhibit that we're looking at now shows the design review area. And so if the project design team wanted to, we could put the parking garage right along Reisterstown Road in that beautiful green corridor there, and we wouldn't be subject to design review. Ironically, we of course don't want to do that, right? We want to build upon the great pedestrian-friendly atmosphere that is envisioned for Pikesville and that all the community plans envision. And I think as you make your way through the plans, you'll see how we celebrate that and bring people in from that side of the road via foot. And then, this important part of so many people who are going to be coming here and the need to park them. And it was really, I think, feedback that was received very early on from the team about this being so great. It's going to be lively. It's going to not only welcome people who are going to be able to walk here, but people from around the community who will drive, and we need a place to put them. And so while it might be tempting to put and tuck a parking garage away in the back of a site like this, that's not really a great design from the standpoint of promoting a pedestrian-friendly atmosphere once you reach the destination. And I think the architecture team will take you through that a little bit. So even though you're technically not reviewing the overall project, it's important for you to understand that the placement of the parking in this location is really the most logical place to do it, to get people in and out of the site off the street that much more quickly. And I think that's pretty much those are pretty much the main points that I wanted to mention, and I'm going to turn it over to the team from Ziegler Sneed to walk through some more of the prettier pictures. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Doug Bothner. I'm the design partner here at Ziegler Sneed Architects, and Chris Brown just had to leave and get in the car. He will be on the call, so if we have questions for him. I've got Dustin on the project and Jacob with me in the room here, so we'll wave if one of us is speaking. We're going to let Dustin walk us through the presentation, and we're just really excited to be in front of you. I recognize a lot of your faces, and we're really grateful to be involved in this really significant community redevelopment project for Pikesville.
Great. You can go to the next slide, Martha. So this project is in the urban village area of the Pikesville Commercial Design Review Area. The project team has adopted the Pikesville Revitalization Guidelines and the revitalization plan as overlay guidance for the site and design. On this slide, we've pulled a selection of guidances from these plans that are especially pertinent to this project. We don't need to go through them here, but we wanted to kind of pull these, and they are very important as we move through the architecture and landscape portions to how we address the site. You can go to the next slide. So these are some context photos of what's around the site. The surrounding context, the surrounding built context is a range of programmatic conditions with office, retail, single family, multifamily residential, and a range of a variety of architectural styles from the 7-story office building that's at the corner of Slade and Reisterstown Road, to the single family residential houses on Irving Place. If you want to go to the next slide. To the, you can see in the second from the right image, the multifamily residential that's on Slade Avenue down the street from the property. And of course, the Pikesville Armory with stone and stucco buildings that are in the rest of the campus. Go to the next slide. On this site, there are 2 existing buildings that Chris mentioned, the 116 Slade and 122 Slade Avenue buildings, as well as the Merson building, are being proposed to be demolished for this project. You can go to the next slide. The 116 and 122 Slade, which we are proposing to demolish, are 30 to 40 foot buildings from the somewhere in the 1950s and 1970s era. They're of unremarkable brick and metal exteriors with modest window openings. You can go to the next slide. And we're going to hand it over here to Unknown to go through the site and landscape existing and proposed features.
Great. Thank you, Dustin. I'm Nick Glace, a partner here at Unknown Studio. We're a Baltimore-based landscape architecture and urban design practice. Extremely thrilled to be part of this design and development team and to be working with the Pikesville Armory Foundation on this project. So I think Chris kind of mentioned that, 122 and 116 Slade are from an urban design standpoint, not the most inspired architecture and sort of urban context here. We've got 2 to 3 story structures that are really surrounded by lawn. There's actually between the 2 buildings, there's sort of an undeveloped lot, which is mostly lawn, south of Merson building. And we have a lot of well, not a lot. There's a few trees like along the property lines, mostly in between the property lines. So we have conifers and some deciduous trees that are sort of a mix of volunteers and screening trees planted in between property lines. This is interestingly, like kind of looking at the site history here, Slade predates Milford Mill Road, as I'm sure you all know, and used to connect to Reisterstown Road. So we have this kind of funky orphan street here at the end of near 116 Slade Avenue that has a little bit of a hammerhead turnaround. So we're really excited that our project is taking this context on and using it as a new front door and entrance to the Armory. If you go to the next slide. So here you get a sense, you know, it's 2 to 3 story office developments with real vehicular and parking centric site planning and some low planting and some of the best trees on the site are, you can see one in the top left image that's declining as are many of the trees in the neighborhood just kind of reach a level of maturity. If you go to the next slide, so this is the before, and what we're really excited by, as Peter mentioned in the introduction, is bringing this new destination for recreation, play, and culture together here at the Armory. And for those of you who haven't stepped out into the vast parade grounds on the west side of the site, it's breathtaking and is going to be an incredible destination in Baltimore County, in the region, folks that are going to come from all over to see this place. And this new arrival boulevard like really unlocks it in exciting ways, we think, by allowing Reisterstown Road to really stay the historic frontage of the Armory development and have this kind of park-like character that's more hearkening towards the military legacy. So we have, you know, Memorial Walk on that side, and the NCO Club is being renovated right now. I think some traffic studies early in the process had shown that a more generous entrance from the south was necessary. And as you can see here, we're planning on, we're going to show several views of this, but introducing a new curb cut that gets really entry boulevard on axis with the historic Armory. So we can scroll forward and get a little bit into the site here. So here you can see existing context on the left. If you go to the next slide, there's a kind of a blow up here of what the entry boulevard looks like. So we're really keen on introducing shade, pedestrian and bicycle friendly pathways connecting from Merson across Slade into the site. A very preliminary possibility of signage location here shown as this, just the white diagram massing on the left. The introduction of lush planting on the ground plane, and we'll take you through our thoughts on how the planting relates to the roadway and the bike and pedestrian pathways. If you go to the next slide, please. And this to us is super exciting, you know, and it's, we've looked at not a million, but dozens of plans for this project, which wrestled with, as mentioned, this does require the removal of a later building, the Merson building, which I believe was a post-war building, you know, not really at the same level of fit and finish as the historic Armory. And sort of a trade-off in removing that building, then suddenly you have visibility to the historic facade that's never really been possible. So on the arrival and then on the turnaround, which is up, we'll see in another image, a vehicular drop-off turnaround, you can really access, or you can really have a full clear view of the Armory historic facade, that gabled end of the Armory. Some of the planting along this boulevard, there's a lot of detail here, so I'm going to show a few images after this, which take you through our thoughts on the tree canopy. I will say that, you know, we're really from the drive outward, we're thinking about things that will really address vehicular and pedestrian scale. And buffer the neighbors on Irving Place on the right and the parking garage, kind of bringing down the scale of the parking garage on the right. A couple things here, you know, just to be clear, we have 3 travel lanes in this roadway, and we're going to be working with the same traffic consultant to fine tune the design. The understanding is that we could have 2 lanes in and 2 lanes out, and it would sort of swap, that middle lane would swap directions about midway point up the driveway. There's also other things that are nice about this in the event that there's a bunch of people leaving at the same time. There could be another exit point from the garage, which you can see which aligns to the existing roadway connector on the left-hand side of the image there. Well, we can always come back to this, but let's move forward to the next slide here, and we can, site grading. There's a gentle slope to the south. We may introduce some transform some of these planting areas into stormwater features to collect and harvest rainwater, but also sort of foreground the environmental sustainability of the project. But we're still working on that. But yeah, gentle slope towards Milford Mill Road. If you could scroll to the next image. So this is an image of stepping out of the historic door of the Armory, kind of looking back at the garage and seeing this drop-off plaza, and with these pathways leading to Milford Mill Road across the Armory, across the driveway, and you get an idea about how some of the materials that we're going to show in the next slides sort of play out around the roadway. So just an overall section of this from east to west, and some of the major planting zones, and how the roadway meets parking, and then sort of buffering on both the left and right sides. It's a fairly symmetrical drive that leads you towards the Armory, and then when you go around the turnaround, you're really on access with that historic facade of the Armory proper. Next slide, please. Site lighting, we're working with a sub-consultant, lighting consultant, Flux Studio, who's been helping shape the design for site lighting across the whole site. And here, yeah, just a picture of this multi-level fixtures, which relate to both pedestrian and vehicular scale, creating a safe experience and comfortable along this boulevard. Next slide, please. And some of the hardscape materials, we're really eager to deliver a safe pedestrian experience. As Peter mentioned, there's a senior center here, which I failed to mention was one of the drivers for some of the surface parking along this boulevard. They've really advocated, although we're introducing ample parking in the garage, it was a real prerequisite for them to come on board as tenants to have surface parking. So that's one of the drivers of the parking along the boulevard, as well as on the east and west sides of the Armory. But yeah, the two paving types on the left for pedestrian and also for roadway edges, and then the paving types on the right, it kind of allows us to introduce a hierarchy of paving that is robust for a variety of uses. And next slide, please. Site furnishings, we're just here showcasing some of the bench types with backed and backless benches. Those wooden benches on the left are anticipated we would be able to reuse some of the incredible, there's a lot of wood on site from some of the oak trees that have declined recently. So really a nice story about mature wreaths there, and as well as bike racks and bollards. If you go to the next slide, please. The street trees along this alley, along this boulevard, we're looking for urban, hardy, robust trees that are compatible with the street tree with the Baltimore County landscape requirements, and bringing seasonal, showcasing seasonal color. Next slide, please. Just quickly, these are some of the planting zones, sort of buffering the landscape on the perimeter, as well as areas of lawn and accessible turf throughout the project. And I think the last slide in this series is showcasing what the driveway perennial mix along the drive, real native and urban tolerant plants that are will do well here in a Piedmont landscape, Baltimore County. I think next slide, please. And that I'm going to hand it, I think, back to Zigger-Sneed for this.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So in addition to the point that Nick has made around the placement of the building and how it opens the site and enhances vehicular and pedestrian access, by locating it on the west side of the site, it really creates a wonderful relationship between the massing of the parking garage, and it's a little washed out in this image, but a corner relationship to the armory, which is plan right and up from it. So the massing and the similar kind of plan layout between those two really creates a nice dialogue between them. Following the Pikesville commercial revitalization guidelines, we're proposing that the front of the garage on Slade Avenue be aligned to the existing buildings. This does require a variance for the front yard setback, which is shown with the number 3 and the purplish line. You can go to the next slide, please. So the plan of the garage of the building is a fairly straightforward 400-car 2-bay garage with a park-on ramp. Vehicular entry and exit are at the northeast corner and the southwest corner, which we saw in unknowns drawings in the previous slides. This design really balances the site parking, which we saw in the previous slides, and structured parking in response to senior center requests for parking in close proximity to where they'll be entering the site. So the vertical circulation in the garage egress is biased to the east and to the north corner of the site, and this creates a close connection to the armory and also connects to the walking paths and vehicular drop-offs. It allows really to get that point where you're entering the garage as close to the armory as we can. The outboard stair tower acts as a beacon to signal where the entry is to the garage, and also by making it a nice experience where you're outside of the garage, will encourage people to take the stairs up and down as a really wonderful experience. You can go to the next slide. So for the facade, vertical perforated panels create a variation of scale and density on the facade while maintaining good natural ventilation and daylighting. Top level light fixtures are pulled in from the perimeter in order to limit light bleed to the surrounds while provide code required lighting on the parking deck. You can go to the next slide. The color palette, which you can see on the left there over the perforated middle fins, the color palette references the natural butler stone on the adjacent armory buildings. This pulls it into conversation with these really important contextual buildings in order to create a cohesive master plan. Next slide. A structured solar panel grid on the roof is located on the western bay of the building. So we're looking at the western facade. It's located over the western bay. So in order to provide solar panels to provide some clean energy and to set back from the eastern side towards the more residential area, we pulled it over to the western side of the garage. You can go to the next slide. The north facade of the building uses a necessary shear wall in order to create a feature wall facing the adjacent event lawns. Next slide. and fairly modest light fixtures are used to signal entry and create and provide code required lighting and are integrated with the architectural features. And with that, we can go to the next slide.
Might as well just.
And that is the end of our presentation.
Okay, well, entire team, thank you very much. Nicely done, and I would agree, it's certainly an outstanding project.
Mr. Usafero, could I mention one question or one comment just about process so people understand where we are, both on the panel and in the community?
If you keep it to within 3 minutes.
Got it. Will do.
Thank
I'll
you.
do 1 minute. We're here before we file for development approval. We're coming to get the design approval. So we're basically in here before this panel to request approval for design. And then there was a brief mention of the need for a variance for this garage. So we will have to have a public hearing to get a variance also, again, which we would do before we get development approvals. So I just want people to understand this is sort of the very beginning of this process, but it's often it's really dictated by zoning and planning that we should be coming in this order to get design approval, then we get the variance, and then we come in for the DRC.
Thank you, Mr. Budd.
Thank you.
That was 2 minutes. Good job. Okay, so at this time, the floor will be open for any public input or feedback from the community. And then again, as a reminder, you'll have 2 minutes speaking on behalf of yourself or 5 minutes on behalf of a community group. Marta, Brett, Jennifer, has anybody signed up from the community to speak?
Yes, I have Denise Watkins as a Sudbrook Park resident would like to comment.
Okay.
Sorry, me again, but I'm in a different capacity. So I'm a Sudbrook Park resident. I just want to say thank you. Great design. Those of us who live in Sudbrook Park are really excited about this project, and we totally understand the need to add parking capacity to the Armory for event space and things. One comment I will say, well, I have a couple, but I was really excited when I saw that alley that's kind of entering the site because I thought it was mostly pedestrian. And it does look like it's been given over to a lot of car circulation. So I think having that be a little more pedestrian oriented, I understand there's a plaza there that can be closed off. But I think having that green alley to the on-axis, or at least to the view of the Armory, is really, really a positive thing. Perhaps for addition of artwork and signage, and I know you're doing that. My second and final comment would be the Milfordville Metro Station is less than a mile from this site, and I know that in future if there's some kind of wayfinding that helps people find the metro station. I realize this is the parking garage, so it's kind of in with transit, but I think that those two can be very compatible. So thank you. This is great. I love that it's oriented this way, that it's not blocking off the view of the Armory. I think that's really, really a positive site, and thanks. I think it's going to be a successful project.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Watkins. Any other folks from the community that have signed up?
Well, in the chat, Mr. Montgomery Pace was asking where the senior center would be, but I think that it looks like it may have been addressed. Mr. Pace, did you have anything else? Montgomery Pace.
Let me unmute.
Yeah, I think we have to unmute him.
Brad, can you unmute Mr. Pace?
Mr. Pace, are you on mute? Brett, did you unmute him?
Oh, thank you.
Oh.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, it's Ms. Pace, but otherwise my
Sorry.
questions were addressed. Thank you.
And that's it. That's all that signed up.
We have also Miss Susan Williams on behalf of the Pikesville community.
Oh.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Ms.
And-
Williams, it's your turn. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I think the most important thing is that the Pine Ridge Association is extremely supportive of the Armory project. And we'd also like to note that they have gone to the expense of hiring some of the best firms that I'm aware of to do this project, some really stellar designers. Unfortunately, I only got like a PDF that was very hard to read in order to do this assessment, so I'll modify from some of my written comments. I'd also like to point out that Howard Needle was one of the major impetuses for this project. It came from the core of the community. That's how it got to be an issue before the governor. So it'd be nice if we could get paper sets of plans or plans prior to further reviews, since our former president was one of the main leaders in getting this to be a project at all. When I first looked at this, I kind of said, wow, and that was a really good wow. I think this is absolutely appropriate for changing and making a grand entry to the Armory campus itself. It also addresses prior community concerns about congestion on Reisterstown Road and pulls it off to Milford Mill Road. And I think the design trade-off for this is between creating this grand entrance and, of course, the Maryland Trust's review for demoing what I think used to be stables originally. And, you know, anytime you do a project, there's design cost and design benefit. And I think this was clearly an excellent decision to move this way because the benefits well outweigh other issues. I'm going to omit some of my comments because I got more information at this presentation. I agree with Ms. Watson that there's an excessive amount of pavement and practically no grand gesture towards pedestrians or bicycles. I had mistook the gray area on the main drive to be a median. So that, you know, does get rid of some of my questions. It would be nice to at least omit the parking between this drive and the garage itself. That would give you the ability to create a grander pedestrian alley, and it needs to also connect. It seems like the pedestrians are really walking through a parking lot like you do at a supermarket, and I don't think that creates a sense of grand entry. And also when you move up and get onto where the exit to the garage is and the both pedestrian and vehicular, that seems very congested and not having a good pedestrian connection to get from Milford Mill Road into the site itself, and that could be strengthened. This community is a walking community. We have a fairly large Orthodox population that walks, and it's very important to create strong pedestrian connections for that. And I also, when I look at the site plan, the narrowness of the green areas created here, you will either have trees or stormwater management, but not both. You have to have a more generous green area to design that well. I'm also interested in the status of stormwater management, because in the state of Maryland, you're supposed to be doing environmental site design to the greatest extent practicable. And it seems to me that if you got rid of some of this parking, you would be able to address stormwater management in an environmental manner. And those kind of things need to be brought into even conceptual design. In terms of traffic, I like the idea of that reversible lane. I am concerned when you get
1 minute
down.
left, Ms.
1
Watkins.
minute, 1 minute
Okay.
for warning. Yes, thank you, Jen.
When you get down to Milford Mill Road, I think you're going to have some turning conflicts there. And when it comes to the garage itself, I think you have a very rare opportunity to really do something very different with the skin of the garage. Very, very, very playful, almost a mesh with artwork on it rather than a traditional garage. It could really be a stellar way for people to enter this complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Anybody else signed up from the community to speak?
I don't have anyone on my end.
Yes, Mr. Tom Fikit says he signed up. I apologize. I didn't see where he asked to speak.
Pat, can you please unmute him?
Yes, I can do that. He's unmuted.
I'm Tom Feketa. I'm with the Pikesville Revitalization Committee. We have been involved with the design of the Armory and this project since the conception, and we are thrilled and we are fully aware of the implications of the garage here, and are thrilled with what you are showing here. We fully support Ms. Williams's comments, and I don't want to go back through them, but underscore at least one aspect of this, that you have a rare opportunity with the walls of the garage to have that artistic element to it, whether it is murals or some other artistic element to it, which would fully support the whole concept of the Armory as a destination for an artistic element, an artistic addition to Pikesville. And I also have a concern that I think Ms. Williams expressed of the access and egress during times when there are events at the Armory, which will happen hopefully very often, and how that traffic flow is going to be arranged other than at a time when normally the traffic is going to be very controlled and limited. So I will stop there and thank you for the opportunity, and truly find the approach with the minor comments that have been made here as being super and exciting. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Tom. Okay, anyone else, Department of Planning, that have signed up to speak?
No, that's everybody.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, it will officially close the public comment period. Now that because this is a commercial project, the Department of Planning puts together a staff report. Marta, would you please read the staff report?
Thank you, Joe. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
we
we
can
can
hear you.
hear you fine.
Okay, so the Department of Planning prepared the staff report based on the Comprehensive Manual of Development Policies, Pikesville Revitalization Action Plan, Pikesville Commercial Revitalization Guidelines, Baltimore County Landscape Manual, and Bill number 98-23. So in terms of site design, staff recommends approval of the site design subject to any recommendation by the design review panel. For architectural design form and image, staff recommends approval of the architectural design form and image subject to the following conditions. Number 1, consider adding solar panels on the upper level of the proposed garage. Number 2, label all proposed light fixtures on the architectural elevations. For open space and landscape design, staff recommends approval subject to the following conditions. Number one, provide a circulation diagram to show proposed pedestrian and vehicular circulation and bike lanes. Number two, label the proposed bike racks on the plan. Number three, label the proposed seating areas and any other site amenities on the plan. And number four, provide a detailed landscape plan with a legend specifying the types of trees provided. For streets, parking, and circulation, staff recommends approval subject to the following condition. Provide a circulation diagram showing pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular circulation and connections throughout the site and to Slate Avenue. And for signage and lighting, staff is unable to recommend approval of the signage at this time due to signage will be developed at a later time. And staff recommends approval of the proposed lighting subject to the following condition. Indicate if any lighting will be provided for the garage building and label on the building elevations. And this concludes the staff report. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Marta, for reading the staff report. So at this time, we'll go ahead and open it up to the panel discussion. When making comments, I would ask the panel members to advise Marta what page you're making comments on. And I think this is a good and appropriate plan to show Marta because it shows the access point in the garage. So we'll start with Mr. Walters. Go ahead, Mr. Walters.
Thank you. And I appreciate the placement of the garage over in the overall site plan. If you could actually go back up to page, maybe sheet 13 into the overall site plan, or 14, perfect. The garage placement in the overall site plan, and I realize we're just looking at a part of it, but it's just slightly off axis with the event lawn, and there's very clearly an axis being kind of drawn and then reinforced with the plaza right to the north of the parking garage, and even with the metal scrim that's over the shear wall. But when you look at the full site plan, it's just a little bit off axis, and I wonder overall if the building, this part of the site can be strengthened by either shifting it to the right or moving the event lawn to the left, to reinforce the axis that I think you've started to draw throughout the full site plan. The other comment deals with the facade, and when you get down to the architectural elevations, the metal panels that are being proposed, the fins that come off the facade, so maybe on this is perfect. So the way that I read the drawings, they're at a higher density at the corner, and then space further apart during the middle of the garage. And when you look at it at an oblique angle, you see a lot of the fins themselves. But when you look at it at one point perspective or across from the residential area, like in Irving Place, you're going to see mostly precast concrete and just the very thin edge of the perforated fins. So I wondered if the design team had thought about, specifically in the middle where you have less, is there an opportunity to angle them at a degree that helps hide some of the precast and the parking, and show a little bit more of the fin itself, to help kind of mask the parking garage, and not be quite as porous for a larger section of the garage on this facade. And then my last comment is, as you've articulated the sides with the corners with the denser pattern. On the west elevation, it makes sense where the ramp is changing elevation in that center portion. If you could stay here, just for a second on the east. I'm wondering on the east facade, especially on the southern edge, if whether that density of the pattern should then on this side relate more to the landscape and how the density of the trees changes as you move further north, and if that should be a stronger relationship, whereas the solar canopy is set back and that the ramp portion of the garage doesn't really play into the facade on the east side.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Would the Zigger-Sneed team like to respond to specifically the comments related to the garage and then also the placement of the garage as it relates to the lawn?
Sure. And thank you, Scott, for your comments. I think they're both well received here. I'll start with the fins because we've done extensive studies on whether we should angle them or not and how to kind of create densities at the corner to break up the length of and scale of the building. So I would say that we could still explore the angle of the fins, or as for some other comments, explore opportunities to increase or decrease the density to accept more art or to create something that does look great from all angles. We all know that this is a building that will be seen in the round and that will be, from the entry drive seen obliquely, but I really respect your perspective on making sure that we're paying attention to the residential buildings that are to the east. And because we have such a great integrated team with Nick and Unknown, I do also like the idea that the garage and the landscape are working together to create, to modulate density and have a conversation between the planted materials and the architecture. So that is a wonderful comment. And again, I think you've got a keen eye to pick up the fact that we are not yet fully locked in on access with the event lawn. It is something that we've talked about. We are trying to kind of balance a lot of factors here, and so as we were preparing this presentation, it was one of the things that we saw opportunity, and we are in that process of iteration and evolution, especially as it relates to the design of the garage, the opportunity unlocked by the north shear wall and its relationship to the event lawn to the north. So I think you'll see as we move forward some movement in that regard. And I think I've hit all of your comments, and I really do respect your keen eye and picking up on this very subtle design.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the response. Let's go to Mr. Kurjakar.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to applaud you for an amazing presentation. I think it's very thoughtful in terms of the way that the design has come to this point and evolved. Very thoughtful in terms of the vehicular circulation, and I really enjoy the materiality between the architecture and the landscape, and how these hues and the textures are sort of defined. If you want to go to the site plan, I do agree with the comment from Mr. Walters regarding the alignment, and Doug, thank you very much for addressing that, and I'm glad to know that you are studying that because that was kind of an off base. But I do want to say that the amount of trees you're planting is going to significantly help buffering some of the garage from the neighbors and surrounding sites. My one comment, as I think Ms. Williams pointed out too, is that the pedestrian connection to Milford Mill Road is kind of weak, and I wonder if there is an opportunity to pull the landscape down towards the south to make that a more stronger community connection. I think once you're done studying moving the building, to align with the event lawn or vice versa. I do strongly feel that the eastern parking bay may need to be eliminated. And I understand you have a parking requirement and you're trying to accommodate a lot of things, but I think that removing that bay and turning it into a real median will help, kind of strengthen that side of the project, and I think will be beneficial. Although I love the material changes in the median and that sort of define the pedestrian and the vehicular ways, I'm a little concerned about pedestrian safety in the median, and I understand the purpose of it. It might be the whole thing could be closed off, and it could become a food truck or an event space and has a great potential. But I think in terms of having maybe bollards or some kind of a barrier that's more permeable might help define the median and protect pedestrians if they are in those areas or walking in those areas. So I think those are my comments. I would love to see a more developed landscape plans, to see what kind of species of trees or really get into it. And thanks for sharing your precedent images of all the trees and planting. Very thoughtful. My last comment and curiosity is, and it might be my fault, but I did not understand the way the stormwater is being treated on this site. So a little bit of elaboration of the strategies that are being used here would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kurjakar. Would the design team like to respond to some of the questions that we just heard?
I'd love to make a quick point on the parking, and then I would love for Nick and the landscape team to jump in. I think we're definitely open to thinking through the parking strategies on the flanks, and I know there's been a few comments on it that have been quite thoughtful. So I think we'll consider that. I just also want to highlight that it's not just these parking spots, but the parking in general has been really heavily driven by the comments from our anchor tenant on the site, which is the senior center. So of course, seniors, they really they value the surface parking spots. They currently have surface parking spots in just a little farther up Reisterstown Road. They actually have more, and they've really asked us, hey, this is like a deal breaker element for us. Please, 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 as many as you can in close proximity to the entrance. So that's really driven it. Again, there's different strategies to do it. This is only part of the site, so we can be thoughtful about it. But I just want to be clear that the pedestrian safety and the close proximity to the surface spots in particular has been a big driver for us. But Nick, I'd love I'll pass it to you for some of the other comments.
Mr. DiPrenzio, I do have one question. I think there's 14 or 16 surface parks there. Would the intent be to sign the spaces appropriately for the senior center, or would they just be a quote unquote typical space that any resident or customer could use?
I'm not sure that we've gotten to that level of decision making yet, but I think they have a particular time of day and week that they use the spaces, so that's probably something we would consider doing.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you all for these comments. They're really focusing in on an area that we're actively working on. And I think there's been a number of comments sort of around the pedestrian and bicycle circulation coming from Milford Mill, and also the connections from the train station to the west. And what it's a little hard to visualize on this plan is that the walkway, the pathway that's coming on the east side of the garage goes straight to the front door of the armory. And so we're trying to balance that with the massing of the garage. And my brain is churning here in terms of thinking about maybe we can make a facade articulation on the garage that makes it feel on center while still having a wide a wide enough pathway to get fire truck circulation, which we need to get into the site 24 feet wide, plus pedestrian and access to the front door. So we're trying not to create too much of a pinch point there, but totally appreciate about wanting to create this kind of strong alignment and connection. But I think the comments about a strong bike pedestrian, I think are helpful for instructive for us in terms of widening those and making it a robust sort of multi-use pathway, which is off the road. And I think what we're showing, you know, we really need to, I think there's an opportunity to kind of double down on that and try to carve out a bit more space between the entry boulevard and the garage. And stormwater, great question, thank you for that. We're actively working on that right now. This little relatively small parcel compared to the overall site has you know, is in between. Basically the rest of the site is sloping in east and west directions, and it actually ends up in 2 different watersheds. And the turnaround that we have here just south of the armory is really the high point of the site. So we've loved the idea of introducing some serious stormwater bioswale, microbiome retention, like along the roadway, but we're just starting to explore it now. But we like that because it foregrounds the kind of environmental stewardship narrative of the site. And yeah, look forward to sharing more of the detailed planting plans as it evolves.
Nick, if I could add one thing to what you said, this is David from the foundation. There was a question around solar panels in the garage. And just in general, as we go through the SD and DD phases right now, we're looking at extensive measures to reduce the carbon footprint, extensive use of solar, looking at geothermal in the back, all in the areas that are non-DRP and all that. But that's a very big consideration of the board, is a very small carbon footprint for this property.
Thank you, David. And I think that your response addresses some of the staff report comments as well. So thank you for that. Okay, so let's go to Ms. Sauce next.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for this very thorough and thoughtful presentation. Great job with all the information. I can't wait to see it further developed. 2 comments or questions for clarification. I looked at your paving material and you were talking about environmental stewardship and stormwater management as a concern. I would hope that some permeable paving will be used. It doesn't look like that in these examples, but as you further the design, I would hope that that can be worked into the design. And then let me go back to my maybe Marta, go to page 20, the showing the section through the width of the streets. Sorry,
21.
that's different on my end. Yeah.
I think it's the next slide after maybe 21. Here we go.
Yes. Talking about pedestrian connectivity, you know, the wide sidewalks right up against the parking. I would love to see that swapped out so that there could be more green space for those trees in those tiny little parking islands, and kind of give a buffer from the pedestrians and the parking. And I think that would better align with some of the connections down to Milford and might facilitate and open up some other things. So I hope as the design continues to evolve, that you might look at insulating the pedestrian a little more. Other than that, I believe my fellow panelists have done a good job of other comments, so I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Sauce. Let's go to Mr. Sharma.
Okay, so I must applaud the good presentation. It was a wonderful rendition. I have one comment. Can we go to the slide 18, please? Yeah. So one concern is the circulation of the traffic on the east side. It may be out of our purview, but we can send it to traffic. The two openings on the Milford Avenue, and the Milford Mill Road, in close proximity, they would create the safety issue. Also, the alignment with the egress of the garage, all the bike lane, the pedestrian, it's a little complicated. It needs to be simplified a little bit. One more additional thing, that all the trees and bushes on the island, I don't know if there's any bushes, but there shouldn't be any bushes because they would block the view of motorists. So that's all I have to say.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Sharma. So we'll go to Mr. Sala next.
Thanks, Joe. Great presentation. Obviously, Zickersnede is one of the top design firms. I know that because I interned there about 20 years ago. So thanks for the wonderful presentation. I do agree with some of the comments and feedback on the circulation, specifically pedestrian access. I was a bit confused, and maybe someone on your team can answer this, but in terms of primary access to the site, do you think people are mostly coming from Milford Road, or who's coming from McHenry Avenue? Is anybody accessing the site from that street?
It's a good question. I think that this will be clearly the primary access to the site. The intention, as Nick had mentioned, is to sort of keep the historic access on the Reisterstown Road side, but really have that be minor. And it's possible that in talking, when we get to the traffic portion, that there's a requirement that, maybe you only go in and out just onto the southbound side or something like that. So we'd have to see if that comes to be, but this is really meant to be primary and to keep cars more generally off of driving around the site where you want to have more pedestrians.
Got it. No, I just, my first intuition there was trying to think of ways to just, instead of having to come in and come out from the same location, that if you could come in off of McHenry and then circulate and exit out of Milford, that it would just simplify how people access and engage with the buildings. This just seems like there's a lot of vehicular access, which I don't want to belabor that point because I know my colleagues, did mention that as well. It's just there's a bit of concern there. Also, just in terms of access off of Milford Road, that just seems really short. If there's any backup traffic or anything like that, that would become a point of congestion for vehicles coming into the site. Just so as you think this through, obviously just be mindful of that. I do appreciate the location of the garage. I think the dialogue with the Armory building is really nice. There's that corner stair there. I think that works really well. The feedback on the facade, I would assume this is a naturally ventilated garage. And so I'm not sure. Obviously, you got to find a balance between ventilating the garage and screening the garage at the same time, specifically at night, because I know those parking garages tend to be lit. I don't know if there's anything in the works as you further design the lighting to have that be on some sort of motion sensor or something like that. There isn't a lot of there isn't a lot of houses nearby, except maybe a couple of houses on Irvine Place. Those kind of tend to be isolated there. So, my hope may be as you develop that facade next to the elevators, maybe there's a bit of solidity to that, sort of shielding those residences from lighting at night from the parking garage itself. But I do appreciate Scott's comment on the fins and maybe thinking of another screening material that would allow you to do some graphics or large scale graphics on a portion of the facade that is highly visible, specifically coming off of that boulevard, that I would assume would be your main facade. But generally, great presentation. I appreciate all of the thought put into it. So I don't have any further comments. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's go to Mr. Can.
Thank you. I also want to compliment the presentation. It's very thorough. I agree with virtually all of the comments. The one thing I struggle with, which is the chicken and egg question, is this is a county historic district and it is a National Register district property. And by supporting this approach, we're also suggesting that we're comfortable with removal of the historic Merson building, although it's of a somewhat different period. And my concern is whether that issue has been brought up to the county Landmark Commission or the people at the state, the Maryland Historical Trust.
Donald, I can speak to that. And yes, they have both had cursory review and approval over the proposal.
Okay.
Just as a point of clarification, the Merson building is the only one of the buildings not on the National Historical Regency. All the rest are being preserved and restored that are on the National Historical Regency.
Good. We didn't have that information in the package that was presented, so I wanted to be clear. So if that's been approved and agreed to, I think that ought to be part of the record. So the file, so that that's resolved for any future conversations. But overall, then that's my primary concern. And if that's been resolved, then I'm comfortable with the presentation and the comments that have been made.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Can. So I'm left, and when you go last of eight design professionals, there's not a whole lot of comments left. I will say that about 18 years ago, I took my professional engineering exam in the Armory building, so I've got some fond memories here. So overall, I think it's a very, very nice presentation. Well done to the design team. The only additional item that I have is the surface parks that are shown on this plan. It just feels like they're wedged in there. Perhaps consider some parallel spaces. It's a little confusing with folks coming into the site. Do you go straight or do you make a hard right? What happens if those spaces are full? It just seems like it could be thought through a little bit more, but I do appreciate how much time and effort that you've put into this. So from my standpoint, I think all the comments have been made thus far. So we're at the point now where we can make a motion. And again, just to remind the panel, we can approve the project as submitted. We could approve the project with certain conditions. Perhaps a condition could be the conditions in the staff report. A condition could be rethinking, the drive aisles or submitting a landscape plan. Or if we feel that the comments are too big, then we can require the applicant to come back before the panel for a second meeting. I do want to restate, though, the comment that Mr. Mudd made, which is this is the county required, early steps in the overall process. Again, it's always tough for applicants to have design fully completed without going through a hearing or going through the development plan process. So I do want to remind my fellow panelists that, again, this is a large project, a lot of information here, but in the scheme of things, still very early. So with that said, I'd like to open it up for any panel member to make a motion.
Mr. Yusuf-Farrow, I'm sorry, I know maybe I'm talking out of turn, and if we were in person, I would try and get your eye and maybe raise my hand, but I have to speak up. Have you heard on one brief thing?
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. And it's really just a request, two requests, as the panel's considering their motions. First of all, we're hopeful as a design team that if the panel is agreeable, and I think that the comments seem today to be workable in the context of an administrative review upon return, that would be wonderful from our perspective. And in my experience working with the DRP, we've had good success in working hand in hand with staff and even with the chairperson of the DRP when we come back to try and address the comments and concerns. So we would ask for you all to consider that if you're inclined to approve it. And then the second thing, somewhat self-serving, but I did not hear any real concerns about the variance that we need, the property line variance that we need to place the building in this location. So I would ask if the minutes could reflect and the recommendation of the panel could reflect a support for that building placement, so that when we do go to a hearing and have to put on our variance case, that we could demonstrate that the design professionals were supportive of that. So I would ask for that consideration as well. Thank you for the point of privilege.
On Mr. Mudd, just to respond to a couple comments. The second comment as it relates to the variance, I don't think that the panel has considered options in terms of placement or what the code says or where it's shown. So I don't believe that we can say that we've considered all options in that regard, but we can say that we've reviewed the plan, we've reviewed the circulation and configuration, and we support it.
That would be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're at the motion now. So would a panel member like to make a motion?
Joe, I can try to summarize what we've heard. So I think we want to consider approval of the project with the following considerations. To consider the alignment of the garage with the event lawn to the north. Consider the placement of the consider the articulation of the fins and how they relate to the landscape on the east facade. Consider the angle of the fins in the less dense center portion of the eastern facade. We'd like the design team to consider permeable pavers as an additional method of stormwater management mitigation, and consider strengthening the bike pedestrian paths towards Slate Avenue to the south, and consider a different approach to the the orientation of the on-grade angle parking south of the Arrival Boulevard. In that the panel generally approves of the location of the parking garage in its relationship to Slate Avenue.
Would it be possible to make a modification to at least when looking at the pedestrian?
Mr. Sell, before we do, I think what I heard was a motion to approve the project with conditions that Mr. Walters listed. Sure, Mr. Shelley, you can contribute to that, but one person's got to make the overall motion. And as I understand it, the revised submission could be reviewed administratively and not come before the panel in a public forum. And then one other comment that I'll just go back to Mr. Walters is you should give consideration to the Department of Planning staff report as an additional condition, if you so choose.
Yes.
So let's pause for 1 second and go to Mr. Sala for any contributions.
No, I was maybe for the record, in terms of the approach to the parking or pedestrian vehicular conditions on site, maybe word that in a manner that states that it's a more pedestrian friendly organization or layout for how the, where the parking's working. There's just a lot of there's a lot of like maybe consolidating the parking instead of splitting it, something to that effect. I'm not sure what the right wording for that would be, to give the design team a little bit of flexibility, but maybe from a design intent, focus on something more pedestrian oriented versus vehicular oriented. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. So let's go back to Mr. Walters. Mr. Walters, could you restate your motion?
Yes, I'll try to get it concise. The panel recommends approval with the following conditions that could be then brought back to for a staff administrative review. That the design team considers the alignment of the parking garage with the event lawn to the north, to consider the articulation of the fins to the landscape to the east of the garage, to consider the angle of the fins in the less dense center portion of the eastern facade, to consider permeable pavers as a stormwater mitigation technique, to look at strengthening the bike and pedestrian paths to the south towards Slade Avenue, to consider a more pedestrian-friendly approach in consolidating the angled parking of the on-grade angled parking off the Arrival Boulevard. And
Thanks, Scott.
And that we agree with the recommendations put forth by the planning department staff.
There is a concise motion on the table. Thank you, Mr. Walters.
Great job.
Department of Planning, is that clear enough for the record?
Yes.
Mr. Walters has a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Kurchakar.
Kurchakar, Mr. Kurchakar, thank you. All in favor, if you could come off of mute and say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion carries. Congratulations to the design team and very well done on the project. Best of luck.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Good luck. Thank you.
Okay, we are at the conclusion of the meeting, so don't all jump at once, but would someone like to make a motion to adjourn the board meeting?
I would like to make a motion to adjourn the board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Kurchakar. Second.
I'll second.
Mr. Walters, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. The board meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a
Good
good
job,
evening. Bye-bye.
everybody.